My husband thinks I'm pregnant to bind him to me. My husband and I had been married for 2 years when everything started to shift. We met in our late 20s, both working in the same office building. He was in IT, I was in marketing. We dated for 3 years before getting married, and things felt solid. We'd talk about kids someday, but it was always a later thing, maybe in our mid 30s when we had more savings and a bigger place. I was on birth control and we were careful, so a pregnancy wasn't something we were planning anytime soon. But life doesn't always follow plans. I started feeling off, tired all the time, nauseous in the mornings, and weirdly sensitive to smells like coffee. I didn't think much of it at first, chalking it up to stress from a big project at work. But when I missed my period, I got a sinking feeling. I bought a pregnancy test at the drugstore and took it in the bathroom at work to avoid doing it at home. The two lines showed up clear as day. I took two more tests that week, all positive. I was pregnant and I hadn't seen it coming. I waited a few days to process it before telling my husband. I wanted to be sure of how I felt. Scared, yes, but also kind of excited. We weren't planning this, but I thought we could handle it. When I finally told him after dinner one night, his reaction wasn't what I expected. He didn't say much, just sat there looking at his plate, then asked if I was sure. I showed him the tests and he nodded, but his face was blank. He didn't ask how I was feeling or what we should do next. Instead, he got quiet for the rest of the night, barely looking at me. I figured he needed time to process, so I didn't push. Over the next week, he started acting distant. He'd stay late at work, spend hours on his phone, and avoid talking about the pregnancy. When I brought it up, like asking if we should start looking at doctors, he'd change the subject or say we'd deal with it later. I noticed he was sleeping on the couch some nights, claiming he didn't want to disturb me if he stayed up late. It hurt, but I told myself he was just freaking out about becoming a dad. Then one evening, I saw a text pop up on his phone from his best friend. It said, "You sure she didn't plan this?" I didn't read more, but it hit me hard. I started wondering if he thought I'd gotten pregnant on purpose. I didn't confront him right away. I wanted to be sure what I was dealing with. I checked my birth control pills, counting them to see if I'd missed any. The pack was consistent with my routine, and I'd never skipped a dose. I even called my doctor to confirm the pills were effective. She said nothing was foolproof, but I'd done everything right. Still, the doubt in my husband's behavior was eating at me. I started noticing little things, like how he'd ask about my work schedule or check my phone when he thought I wasn't looking. It felt like he was searching for proof I'd tricked him. I decided to keep track of his actions while figuring out how to address it without starting a fight. The last thing I wanted was to push him further away, especially with a baby on the way. The tension with my husband grew worse over the next couple of weeks. He was still distant, barely engaging when I tried to talk about the pregnancy. I'd bring up practical stuff like budgeting for doctor visits or picking a prenatal vitamin, and he'd give short answers or say he was too tired to discuss it. It wasn't just that he seemed uninterested, it felt like he was pulling away from me entirely. He'd come home late, claiming work was busy, but I noticed he was spending more time texting his friends than usual. I caught another glimpse of a message from his buddy, something about making sure you're not stuck. It confirmed my fear. He thought I'd gotten pregnant on purpose to tie him down. I started keeping a closer eye on his behavior, not because I wanted to snoop, but because I needed to understand what was going on in his head. I noticed he'd check my purse when he thought I was asleep, like he was looking for something. Once I found him scrolling through my calendar app on my phone, lingering on the weeks before I found out I was pregnant. It was clear he was trying to piece together a timeline, maybe to figure out if I'd planned this. I felt hurt and angry, but kept quiet, hoping to gather more evidence before bringing it up. I didn't want to accuse him and risk a blowout without being sure. Meanwhile, I had my first doctor's appointment. The ultrasound showed a tiny blob, and the doctor said everything looked normal about 7 weeks along. I was excited but also scared, especially since I was dealing with this alone. I showed my husband the ultrasound picture, thinking it might make things real for him. He looked at it for a second, said, "Cool," and went back to his laptop. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how we used to plan our future together. Trips, a house, maybe kids years down the line. Now it felt like he saw me as the enemy. I decided to talk to my best friend for advice. She'd known us both since we started dating and had seen us through good and bad times. I told her about his coldness and the texts I'd seen. She was shocked, but said he might be freaking out because his friend was feeding him doubts. She suggested I check his messages to see how deep this went, but I wasn't ready to cross that line. Instead, I started leaving little tests, like mentioning I'd missed a pill months ago, a lie, to see how he'd react. He got quiet, asked a few pointed questions about when and how, then dropped it. It was like he was building a case in his head. I also reached out to my mom, who'd been through her own rough patches with my dad. She said some guys get paranoid when life changes fast, especially if their friends egg them on. She advised me to confront him calmly but firmly, laying out how his behavior was affecting me. I wasn't sure I was ready, but I started writing down everything: his late nights, the texts, the way he checked my stuff. I also saved screenshots of my pill prescription and doctor's notes, just in case I needed to prove I hadn't done anything sneaky. The pregnancy was already exhausting, and dealing with his suspicions was making it harder. I knew I had to address it soon, but I wanted to be prepared for whatever he might say. I planned to sit him down after my next appointment, hoping a clear conversation could get us back on track, or at least show me where we stood. By the time my next doctor's appointment came around, I was emotionally drained. My husband's distance had turned into a wall between us. He'd stopped asking about the pregnancy altogether, and I caught him checking my phone again, this time looking at my texts with my doctor. I'd been documenting everything: his late nights, the sneaky glances at my stuff, the texts from his friend I'd glimpsed. I had screenshots of my birth control prescription and a note from my doctor, confirming I'd followed it correctly. I was ready to confront him, but I wanted to do it after the appointment, hoping the reality of the baby might shift his perspective. The appointment went well. The doctor said I was 9 weeks along and the heartbeat was strong. I got another ultrasound picture, and for a moment, I felt hopeful. I decided to show it to my husband that evening and lay everything out. When I got home, he was on the couch, scrolling through his phone. I showed him the picture and told him how the appointment went. He glanced at it, nodded, and said nothing. That was my breaking point. I couldn't keep pretending this was just him needing time. I sat down and told him I'd noticed how he'd been acting. Distant, suspicious, checking my things. I said I saw the text from his friend and felt like he thought I'd gotten pregnant on purpose. I showed him the prescription screenshots and explained I'd been as surprised as he was. I asked him to be honest about what he was thinking. He looked uncomfortable, but finally admitted he'd been doubting me. His friend had convinced him I might have planned the pregnancy to lock him into the marriage, especially since we'd had a rough patch a few months before over finances. He said he wasn't sure if he could trust that it was an accident. I was hurt but kept calm. I asked why he didn't talk to me instead of assuming the worst. He said he didn't know how to bring it up without sounding like a jerk. I pointed out that sneaking around and pulling away wasn't better. I told him the pregnancy was unexpected for me too, but I was trying to make it work, and his distrust was making it impossible. He got quiet, then said he needed time to think. I agreed, but said we couldn't keep going like this, especially with a baby coming. Over the next few days, he started opening up more. He admitted his friend had been pushing the trapped idea, and he'd let it get in his head. He apologized for not trusting me and said he was scared about being a dad. I suggested we talk to a counselor to sort through it, and he agreed. We found a therapist who helped us communicate better. It wasn't a quick fix. There were still tense moments, and I struggled to let go of the hurt from his suspicions. But he stopped talking to his friend as much and made an effort to be involved, like coming to the next appointment. By the time our daughter was born, things were better but not perfect. We'd learned to be more honest, even when it was hard. I forgave him, but I didn't forget how fast he doubted me. It taught me to set boundaries and not ignore red flags, even in a marriage. We're still together, raising our kid and working on trust every day. Looking back, I wish I'd called out his behavior sooner, but I'm glad we faced it before it broke us. If I was in a situation where my partner didn't trust me, I'd address it head-on sooner rather than letting it fester. I'd sit them down and ask straight up what's going on, no beating around the bush. Keeping evidence like receipts or records would be my go-to if I needed to prove I was being honest. I'd also set clear boundaries. If they're checking my phone or acting sneaky, I'd call it out and say it's not okay. Communication is everything, and I'd push for it even if it feels awkward. If I felt like a friend was stirring up trouble in my relationship, I'd talk to my partner about it directly. I wouldn't confront the friend myself, that could backfire, but I'd ask my partner to handle it or at least not let it influence them. In any tough situation, I'd lean on someone I trust, like a close friend or family member, to get perspective and advice. It helps to have an outside view when emotions are high. For anyone dealing with something similar, my advice is to trust your gut. If something feels off, don't ignore it. Keep records, talk openly, and don't let someone else's doubts make you doubt yourself. Surround yourself with people who lift you up and always have a plan for your own peace of mind, whether that's therapy, a support system, or knowing your worth. That's how you keep your head straight no matter what's thrown at you.